Hi everyone, welcome to today's 10-minute webinar on measuring unique samples. I'm Robert Grotans, the Global Technical Marketing Manager at X-Rite, and I'll be moderating today's webinar. Today we have two video demonstrations followed by a short Q&A session. First, Bob Binder, one of our solution architects here at X-Rite, will be demoing our new fixture for measuring cylindrical samples. And then Tim Mao, our Applications and Technical Support Manager, will demo how to measure with non-contact and small objects. Just a few things to go over before we get started. Due to the number of people that are attending today's webinar, we'll keep everyone muted. During both demos, if you have any questions, please use the questions function on the GoToWebinar panel. Again, we'll have some time at the end of the videos to answer a few of them. If we don't get to yours, we'll have someone follow up with you afterwards. Finally, this webinar will be recorded and you'll receive a link so that you can review the webinar at your convenience. So with that, I'll begin playing the first video. If you cannot hear the video, the audio is coming through your computer speakers, so you may need to adjust your volume.
So one of the key features of this cup and cylinder fixture is the sample arm, which allows us to take our sample that we want to measure and just slip it over the arm. This keeps the surface of the sample parallel with this table that the instrument sets on. And the white material that you see here covering the arm, this is a Munsell backing material, which gives us a CIE compliant backer for our sample. Today I'm going to take some measurements to demonstrate this for you, and I'm taking the readings into our new ColorCert QA Tools software. To take the reading, and I'm using an X-Rite Exact, I simply place it on the fixture, I align the optics with the area I want to measure, and I take a reading. The data transfers to the software, and to take a subsequent reading, I simply rotate the sample and reposition the exact, and I can take another reading. And I can do this as many times as necessary. Another key feature of the device is we have the ability to accommodate samples of different thicknesses by replacing this block, which aligns the surface of the arm along with the thickness of the material we're measuring to the surface of the platform. This allows us to measure samples of all different thicknesses. So for example, we were going to switch from a poly cup to a foam cup. We can easily accommodate that. We can also use this instrument for measuring all different samples. In this case, we're not printing a cup, but we're actually molding a cup that's a solid color. And in the same way, I can take a reading of the sample as we're molding them to keep our production in line. Another key benefit that we have is this will accommodate different instruments. Today I've been using an X-Rite Exact, but this also works with our CI64 series of instruments. And an additional feature with this instrument has built into it mounting holes for various fixtures, and we have a little bracket that we can mount on here. The bracket then slides in this groove, and what this does is this keeps the optics centered over this bar so that every time we take a measurement, we know that we have the instrument positioned properly. With the Exact, we have two molded in alignment bars, and we have a scribe mark on these blocks. And what I do is I simply align those visually, and then I can take readings. Just one last point, this fixture allows us to measure samples of all different configurations. Here we have a special device for holding paint, and just like with the drinking cup, I can take measurements of this using this fixture.
I'll now begin playing the second video for everyone to watch.
Today, I'm going to talk with you about using our instrument, the MetaView, to measure some very difficult samples. The first example we're going to use is the necessity to measure something that the instrument cannot touch. This may be for several reasons. In our case, it's because we're dealing with a liquid. You can see I've got some mayonnaise, some ketchup, and some mustard here. And we've got our instrument loaded into this stand. And that stand accepts this drawer, we call it, with a bit of a knockout in it that will hold this spoon. So I've loaded some mustard into the spoon. That can be put into the drawer, which slides very nicely into the stand, into position under the instrument. And you can see on the screen of the software now, in the Color IQC software that I'm using, you can see the mustard is actually there. I'm going to click Next, and this instrument's actually going to take a measurement of the mustard for me. It takes just a second because we're doing a full video capture of that and all of its spectral data, and I now have the mustard color stored as a standard in my software. I could take batches of mustard and do a similar thing. I'd just simply pull this out. I don't even have to take the drawer all the way out. I can pull the spoon out, clean it out, put a spoon with a batch of mustard in, slide it in, take a measurement, and continue. So that's how we use the MetaView instrument and the stand and the spoon to measure a liquid sample. You could do a similar method to measure the samples that cannot be contacted by the instrument. So now let's look at another way we can use the MetaView, this time with its adjustable stand that allows us to measure a variety of different objects. We're going to start with this piece of fabric, which you can see has a number of different colors on it. I'm going to slide that fabric underneath the instrument and align it so I can see where I want to measure. And if we look at the computer software here, the IQC software, you'll see a view of the blue and the brown dots. And the size of the aperture is currently at 12 millimeters. What this instrument allows me to do is control the size of my measurement. And you can see as I make it smaller, I can pick, I want a 3 millimeter measurement, and I want to measure right there by pointing and clicking. I can now take a measurement of the blue spot. The software will even save the image of this, so I can have an audit trail to track not only what I measured, but where I measured it. And then if I go right back in, even without moving, I could come over here and I need to go even smaller, let's say 2 millimeter. And I want to measure the brown right there, point and click, hit next. So I can measure multiple locations within a single sample. I can measure spots as small as 2 millimeters and with a point and click direct to the software where to take the measurement. Now that works great in this particular example with this fabric, but what if my sample isn't flat? For example, I have this, it's a little fidget toy I play with at my desk some days, but it's just a wooden blocks that have some different colors on them, and if I want to measure them, what this adjustable stand allows me to do is I can crank it up to the proper height, essentially align it, lower it so it's barely touching, and then just off of that a bit. Now you can see I've got the orange part of that block with its blue star, and believe it or not, 2 millimeters, if I click right in the center of that, I can measure the middle of that blue star. Something that's a very small object that would be nearly impossible to measure with any other instrument. And yet I can go in there, take a measurement, capture the color of that measurement, the color of that star, capture its blue, and if I needed to also measure the orange in there and I wanted to do that in a bigger area, again, I could do that. Point and click, that's too big. And on we go. So there are the possibilities of the things that we could potentially measure with this instrument because of that ability to zoom down to a smaller aperture, to point and click areas I want to measure. For example, even the fact that I measured this orange, but I avoided over here in the orange where you can see there's a flaw in that color. So it allows us to not only measure small samples, but to avoid flaws in our sample and get good color data. So thank you. That's how we can use this MetaView instrument. It's adjustable stand to measure a variety of samples, not only their dimensions for height to be able to fit under the instrument, but also very small pieces of those samples. Thank you.
So that concludes both of the videos. We do have Bob and Tim in the room with me now. If you'd like to ask a question, they both have time to answer a couple of questions. I'll give you a few moments if you haven't submitted a question yet to do so.
Okay, this is Bob. I'll go ahead and start out here, Robert. One question we've got here that someone asked, it's a great question, is what happens when the backer on the sample arm with our cup and cylinder fixture gets soiled? This is Munsell backing material that we have covering the arm, and we are going to be delivering with the fixture die-cut pieces of Munsell material that are self-adhesive. So you can simply take a piece, apply it to the arm, and when it becomes soiled, you can remove it and replace that. So that is a replaceable feature so that you can always have fresh backing material. And looks like another question here again regarding the cylinder and cup fixture. Someone is asking if they can purchase multiple blocks to accommodate different thicknesses of material. And yes, you can. Our expectation is that most customers will purchase the fixture with a single block for measuring a single thickness of item, but you can purchase more than one block if you have a need to. It's relatively easy to switch out the block. If you can see in the image here, there's 3 screws that you remove and you put the other block in, and that will adjust the arm to a different height. So yes, the answer to that, we can purchase multiple blocks for different thickness items.
All right, thanks, Bob. This is Tim. So a couple of questions that we see as well for the second set of the videos there. Someone asked about the volume of the spoon. I honestly don't know the exact volume of the spoon that I was using, but let me tell you this. That's a small one. There's 2 different sizes of spoons that will fit into that drawer. We also have the ability, there's a holder in the drawer that's holding the spoons, and you can literally remove that holder, and it's the right size to fit a Petri dish in. So depending on what you need to measure, you can use any of those. Those are all standard options from X-Rite. We also have worked with customers to make a custom drawer that has a cutout in it specific to their object that they need to measure, whether that's liquid or powder or whatever, or even small parts. It's possible for us to produce that very easily. The spoons are made of another question we have here is about the spoons being they're made of a plastic that it can be cleaned with solvents, typical laboratory solvents, water and so forth. The other question I have was someone asking about having a CI64 instrument, and can this be adjusted? I'm interpreting that as used with the MetaView or comparable to the MetaView. The MetaView is a 45-0 instrument, so its geometry is different than the sphere instrument is. It's also as we demonstrated, a non-contact instrument. And so the data it's going to derive would actually agree with the exact instrument that Bob was showing in the first video because of their geometry being the same. But there are always some slight variations introduced when we go to a non-contact instrument versus a contact instrument.
One more question I see here that's a really good question regarding the cylinder fixture. Someone is asking about the part number for it. And this item is what we refer to as a configured item, so it's not as simple as a single part number. The reason for that is you can purchase it with or without the attachment that's used with the CI6X instruments. And you can also, you need to specify which height adjustment block or blocks that you need to purchase with it. So you can get more information about this on our website or certainly from your sales rep. You know, we'd be happy to help you out and get the proper configuration that you need.
Thanks, Bob and Tim. That was the last question we have time for today. So this marks the end of our webinar. Again, we will follow up with you if we didn't get to your question, and you will receive a link to this recording. Thanks everyone for joining today, and have a great day.